Well, Jeremy Corbyn clearly got the Tories rattled with Labour's election pledge to scrap tuition fees. Last week, the government cancelled a planned hike in fees, changed the way repayments work, and announced a review of the whole system. Now, I was Chancellor of the University at York at the time the £9,000 a year fees were introduced, and I was always deeply opposed to them. I hated the likely long-term effect it would have on kids in their early 20s being saddled with £50,000 worth of debt. And it seemed so unfair that my generation, and people like me, who paid nothing to go to university, should be pulling up the drawbridge on those who followed. I think it's time to scrap tuition fees and replace them with a graduate tax, 2 pence or more on income tax for new graduates, instead of them having these enormous debts before they even start working. And graduates of early generations, those of us who were lucky enough to go to university for free, we should contribute more as well. Labour, Liberal and particularly Tory politicians have created the shambles we now have, and it's time for them to fix it.
I have this peculiar honour of having been through all three of the systems that you just named, because it took me a bit longer to graduate for reasons that I won't go into now than normal. And so I started at university with a maintenance grant paid, means tested, and my fees paid. By the time I graduated, the fees were at the third stage there, 9k. They went from 1k to 3k to 9k.
You must have done an all-time record at university.
I did my master's in 1 year, but my undergraduate took 10, and we won't go into that. But I actually witnessed all three of those systems, and I think the current system, I think you're right, it's unworkable. I don't know if people know, but at 6% interest rate on the fees, that's higher than you'd pay on a mortgage, for example. And the reason, the reason it's unworkable is that with such a high interest rate and with students ending up in around 50 or more £1,000 of debt, they don't end up paying it back. Because, of course, the government says if you don't pay it back within, 30 years, you don't have to. Now, that means the system is going to default because it's not listed as a part of the deficit because it's a debt and not an expense. And so it's not being, it's a cheat, they're fudging the thing. It's not being recorded as a deficit. At the same time, people are going to default on their loans. So the whole thing's going to collapse. And by and large, the universities have quite liked the system because it's meant a lot more money coming to universities. But I mean, there were some interesting figures last week from the Institute for Fiscal Studies. We've already discussed once today. But the Institute for Fiscal Studies came up with some figures that showed that the £9,000 a year scheme, as it's now going to be run under the changes made last week, actually is more expensive to the taxpayer than the £3,000 a year.
Wow.
So why I think the thing doesn't work is you're actually telling kids that having 50,000 of debt is all right.
Yeah.
And that's why I think we made a terrible mistake. And that's why I do believe, I can understand that the people who go to university in the end should pay for it. That's, I've not a problem with that.
You've got to ring-fence the tax.
But you've got to, yes, I'd say to them, but I'd also come back, which I think is legally quite difficult, but I'd come back to people like us who did also go and didn't pay and say, come on guys, it's time you lot paid a bit more. It's time we put some tax upon you. But I think that's almost impossible to do. But I think you can say, look, when you leave university, you instead of paying 20 and get your first job, instead of paying 20p in the pound, you're going to pay 22p in the pound. And when you get to 40, you know, because most of them will get to 40% at some stage, you get to, or a lot of them will, you pay 42p or 44p or something. But at least you're not telling them. At least they're not leaving thinking, I've got this enormous debt. I mean, there's quite a good, I got a clip of a student talking about it.
The student debt really will be a bit of a stress and a struggle. So I think thinking prior to what I will be doing, it's just the background stress that will always be in the back of your head. So I just hope that it is worth it, and I hope it is worth the stress alongside all the rest of the work that I will be doing.
The one interesting thing, I mean, when they first introduced it, my fear was it would put off a lot of poorer kids from going to university. There's no evidence that that's happened. It's quite interesting. There's no evidence that. That's because I think kids go to university and they don't even think about what life's like going to be afterwards. But for them to then say to these kids, you owe £50,000, what? They might as well go and borrow another 100,000 somewhere else.
Isn't the bigger question here that, what is university for? We're sending all kids to university these days, many of whom don't want to be there, many of whom shouldn't be there. Maybe we could save money in another way by actually not putting pressure on kids to go. Now, I think there is a pressure on all children to go. Maybe that pressure comes from their parents. Maybe if they were made to feel that doing other courses, doing
apprenticeships.
I hate to say trades, but apprenticeships, yes. Maybe that would suit a lot more people, and it would save more money in the long run. Educating people who can't get a job.
But we're not sending all. I mean, or anywhere near all.
About 33%.
You know, 33, 30. I suspect we're getting to 40% to go.
Where are those figures? 33. That doesn't sound like.
Yeah, we're certainly not sending all. But your point is right. Obviously, that the kids who don't want to go to university aren't suited to university. That's fine.
No, but don't you think the problem we've got, Greg, is in the future, the jobs of the future are going to require that sort of level of education in the way that they didn't in the past. You know, AI are going to take over the sort of manual skilled jobs. Yep. So therefore, we do have to figure out how we make higher education much more affordable for the majority in terms of social mobility.
Well, you've already got graduates who are doing jobs, who are coming out to do jobs that were non-graduate jobs 20 years ago. It's already changed because of the numbers going. Yeah. I happen to think it's a good idea. I would get as many kids as I could to stay in education for longer, learn more. I don't really care if they do a subject that has nothing to do with what they're eventually going to do.
What about making it means tested?
That's an expensive
Why shouldn't we just
educate?
have it that the kids that are from families that can afford to pay and those that can't don't?
Well, that's what we had for years, of course.
Yeah.
Well, they never paid fees. They paid their own.
So why can't we do that again?
Their own lodgings and things like that.
You accept the principle. It's not like the health service where education shouldn't be free at the point of delivery. You accept that you should pay at some point in your life for the benefit of having had a university education, which all the evidence shows you earn something like $250,000 over the course of your lifetime. Yeah. So it actually, you can pay for your... The question is not, don't do it up front when you're starting out, and so you start your career, as it were, saddled with debts, as my kids have done. You know, 50 grand, 40 grand.
Given that a lot of them will never pay it back, actually they're not saddled with 50 grand. But the trouble is that's what they think they're saddled with.
They are. And the stress of that.
Somebody in the end
and the normalisation for debt that creates.
But also the Treasury,
the fact you can get away with it as well. You don't have to pay it back.
They're already writing off a quarter of it. I mean, 10 billion is gone. You know, they've already accounted for the fact that a third of it is not ever going to be paid back.
That's right.
So it's a sort of loss.
Well, you've got the same government basically announcing that it's going to clamp down on gambling and compulsive behaviour on credit cards, online gambling, to try and change the culture around that. And yet, in the same breath, we're telling students to start their lives in 50,000 debt. It can't be. You're sending mixed messages here. It can't be healthy for people to think it's okay to be in that much debt.
You see, I think it was a political philosophy that started all this, not about the money. I think they actually wanted to change universities so that universities had to be more responsive to a market.
Driven,
I do think that's what happened. But I think it's backfired, and it's backfired so enormously now that this government know they've got to change. Everybody knows it's got to change. This can't continue. What I feel sorry for are this sort of probably 5 or 6 years worth of kids who are...
Do you think we should pay back our free university education? I say free, but it was paid for by the taxpayer.
I think... This is hypothetical, and I don't think you can do it, but I would say to those of us who had free... I mean, I paid nothing to go to university.
Same here.
I paid no fees, and I got a full grant.
I was paid to go to university. Because you got full grant.
Well, the Netherlands still does that, by the way.